Yeah, so my name is Christian Riddik. I am a garden to table educator. My mission is to really connect our people back to the land, specifically people of the African diaspora and beyond, and really get them to understand where their food comes from. And that's always been important for me. And I started maybe like some of you have, just not really knowing how to garden, not knowing where to start, and just trying things and just really growing from that. So I'm really excited to teach you what I've learned and what I know. And I'll be happy to get into more of my story today with you. So let me talk about the three-step framework and the process of how do I transform these spaces, even if I don't maybe not have the right space or the right light. How can you do it, Christian? You asked me that, right? All right, so let's get into step one, which is to evaluate your space. If you don't know what kind of space you're working with, you're going to be doomed from the start because you're going to have all kinds of stuff attacking it. You don't know what's going to happen. You need to evaluate your space and really understand what are you working with. First, you want to decide where are you going to grow? Are you going to grow in the window? Okay, windows, like the best window is I would say southwest facing window. So like west can be too hot for some house plants, but for the most part, west is probably the brightest. Just the way the sun sets and rises. South facing window is also great. If you're growing in a north or east facing window, those tend to be a little bit lower in light. So you want to consider plants that are more shade tolerant. Some house plants will do fine in there, but as far as growing food, ideally, if you're just using direct sunlight, those are the type of spaces you want to be in. You can also grow in your kitchen space. Herbs are great space to put kitchens. Some kitchens have windows, some don't. We'll get into that. I've seen people grow in basements, with the grow light system, just because they have a lot of room in basements. Of course, you can bring plants into the bedrooms and be strategic about that. You need to learn about what the limitations of your space are. So light is a big one. That's the one that usually hold people back, right? How much sun are you getting? If you don't have enough sun, you're going to have to substitute with grow lights. And even then, I would suggest most of the time trying to get some type of grow light, unless you are starting from a transplant, which is basically the plant is already started for you. It's really hard to start seeds from scratch in a window. Just think about it, because you're getting light. It's not directly in the sunlight. If you have a couple of rainy days, you're already getting filtered light as it is. If you have a couple of dark rainy days and you're just starting from a baby, seed, and you're not getting consistent light, it's already in trouble and you're off to a rough start, and it's going to, regress in its growth. So you have to think about that. And that's why I always suggest investing in some type of grow lights that are on the smaller side, maybe to start off. I mean, they make it so affordable and so accessible now. They have this thing called the Arrow Garden, which is like the Keurig of grow lights, basically. You can actually put these little pods in the machine and they'll grow in like a hydroponic system for you. Yeah. And those are kind of cool if you're just getting started. I've definitely had one of those. Those are cool.
Quick question from someone. They said, sure. Do you find moving around the plants to test where the best light should be? Like, should you be moving them around and play around with it, or?
Absolutely. It depends on what you're doing. So if you're growing, say you have some outdoor space and you're able to do a garden bed, it's a little harder to move around, right? So you want to kind of do that research ahead of time to make sure you're not moving too much, because there's some plants that, it's okay to move around. Other plants, once they get established and their roots are down, they don't really like to get moved too much. So if you're going to do that work and want the production to be right, go ahead and find that stuff out ahead of time before you start putting stuff in the ground. This is why the winter time is important, because this is a great time to plan out your garden and think about how much space do I have, how much do I want to grow, and where will everything fit correctly. Because just because something looks good in one spot doesn't mean it's going to grow good in that same spot. So you have to understand the conditions of your different vegetables or whatever you're growing. One little trick actually, and this isn't even in the slide, but I'll give you guys the freebie on this one. Before I buy any plant, I do something called a plant birth certificate. So if you're taking notes, write that down. Plant birth certificate. What that is I take a little index card. I'll draw a little picture of whatever plant I'm doing, and then I'll put the characteristics of what that plant needs. So I have a rundown of what that plant needs and how it's going to survive, and I'll put notes on the back. So I'll put the temperature of what the plant needs, how much to water it. Some plants like to be watered weekly. Some plants like to be dried out in between watering. So putting that information and just giving the rundown of what that plant is supposed to look like. That's been super helpful for me, and it helps me before I even buy plants because it lets me know, oh, I don't have the capacity for this yet, but maybe I can get there, one day. Saves a lot of time too.
Yeah, we've got a couple of comments here.
Please.
Carlene is asking, I guess using your kitchen under mount lights can work also for your seedlings. It's, I guess, a comment / question. Is that?
Yeah, you can absolutely use kitchen space to get your seedlings going. I've seen people wired in a house where they have almost the cords inside the wall, so it looks like a lighting structure, but it's actually a grow light. And so there's different bulbs and lights you can get that can fit in your regular lamps or whatever you have in your, say, kitchen or your space, and you can convert it into grow lights so it actually gets the right lighting to help the plant grow and thrive in that space. Yeah, actually, in my room, I didn't even know I have an LED light that actually doubles as a plant light. And so my plants get a little bit of extra sunshine, and I got that on accident. Yeah. Any other questions? These are great questions.
Another one. Are there any other vegetables? Oh, wait. I learned the hard way that I needed to plant 2 tomato plants to produce. Are there other vegetables that need to be planted in pairs?
Yeah, tomatillo. Yeah, tomatillo plants.
Tomatillo plants.
Yeah, there's a couple plants, like you said. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't had, oh, she didn't say tomato, she said tomatillo.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay, yes. Yeah, there are some plants that do well together. There's something called, they're plants like companion growing is that the term that's called. There's some plants that grow well together. Typically, if you go around the world and look at things that are in specific cuisines, I'll give you an example, like eggplant and parsley. Those are like Italian cooking items, right? Those actually grow pretty well together. You can put those in the same container. You also think of the 3 sisters, right? So corn, squash, and beans. If you grow those 3 in harmony, those benefit each other. So the corn grows really tall, right? So that gives the beans something to climb up, okay? And then the beans provide nitrogen to the soil, and then the squash will protect everything from predators and different things like that. So there's ways to grow things together that so everything is in sync. And when you think of the 3 sisters, a lot of those things are in, like, for example, Mexican cuisine. Like if you have like tacos or something like that, you might see those things in like all a taco or on a plate, that go together in harmony. So if you think about how you eat and what your food culture is at home, that could go a long way in figuring out what goes together. Also, knowing the origin of where things come from helps in figuring out what kind of conditions it likes and what grows well with it. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. I know we got some great questions. Keep the questions coming. A couple last things on the evaluating space. Make sure you're protecting your home surfaces. I can't tell you, my mom was so mad at me when I was living at home. I used to get dirt all over the carpet and everything like that. Make sure you have some type of catch tray or something to, make sure you're protecting your surfaces. There's so many ways to do it though. I line my pots with some plastic, like extra plastic or something I have around the house. You don't have to use plastic. You can use anything that will keep it from spilling out, and then putting another pot inside of that. So there's multiple ways to do it. And lastly is protecting your plants against pests. If you have those foundational components down, that will take a lot of the pest out. You'll still deal with stuff like fungus gnats and stuff from time to time, but it's an easy fix. You got sticky paper and things like that. All right, so let's talk about the light. So if you don't have any light, what does that even look like? So these are some examples in this picture of different types of lighting situations, grow lights. They come in all different shapes and forms. Like I said, you can have just bulbs for a specific plant, and you can just put it in one of your, standard lamps and grow stuff that way. So like I was saying before, natural light is great if you're growing outside. Great, you don't really have to worry about this. But if you don't have the space and you're trying to grow something inside, you're definitely going to want grow lights if you want to take this a little bit more seriously. So there's different types of grow light. Like I said, the Arrow Garden, the Keurig of grow lights. You have adjustable, these long, flexible pieces where you can put it against a wall. You can grow vertically. I have the one on the top right. That is like a full spectrum light there. You can grow a lot in that. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of the differences between the lights and what to look for specifically. Because that can get complicated. Yeah, so not all bulbs are created equally. You need to know that there are specific types of light that are similar to the light you would see outside. So you can't just take your random light in your house, put it by a plant, and then hope for the best. That's not going to work, unfortunately. I wish it works like that. It's just not. That's not how science works. But things to keep in mind if you're going to do grow lights. So HOT5 fluorescent lamps are a good place to start. I will give those, maybe we can put those in the chat as well. But there's two types of things I want you to pay attention to. The Kelvin and the watts I would say are the most important. So the Kelvins, if you do a 6,500 Kelvin light, those are great for growing plants in their vegetative state, like seedlings, salad greens, leafy herbs, things like that. Anything where you want the leaves and not necessarily the fruit. A 6,500 Kelvin light will do great. And then a 2,700 Kelvin is great for warmer plants who you want to flower and fruit. If you're trying to get a flower or a fruit from it, like tomatoes, like eggplants, like peppers, that's a number you need to pay attention to. Okay, so one is on the cooler side of the spectrum, and then one is on the warmer side of the spectrum. Yeah. All right. Another thing about the grow lights is that grow lights need to sleep like you do. And so you need to make sure when you go to bed, your lights go off. Because what's going to happen is if you keep your lights on all night, they're just going to go and they can burn your plants just because it's just not natural. They have built-in timers into it. I don't know how God made plants, but they know, when they're getting too much light or not enough light. And they have that built in. So you have to be very specific on how some plants last in that state. So these are some measurements. I'm not going to get into the full detail of these, but you can have this access to this recording and look at this later. But like I said, Kelvin, watts are important because it's going to tell you how much it's going to cost to run these lights. There's very inexpensive lights, but you want to be careful because some can run you up if you don't have the right lights. But these are two things you definitely want to look at. And those are some other, if you've ever seen these on different light boxes or things like that, that's what those mean. All right. Any questions so far? Any other questions?
Just a comment. Awesome.
Thank you. Sometimes I like ramble on because I get so excited about this stuff, but I'm glad you guys are engaged. This is good.
Yeah.
All right. So step number 3, building your container. If you don't build the right container, if you don't have the right foundation, your roots, your plant are not going to survive. So first you need to pick the right container for your plants, right? So there's a couple of different, there's so many, anything that has some type of drainage in it can be a container. I've seen people grow in teapots. I've seen people grow in shoes, like anything that holds soil and has some type of drainage, it's a container. It doesn't matter. And so that's great because it leaves some creativity. But you also need to know which type of container works best with which type of plant. right? So you have plastic type of containers. You have the clay containers. Those are, people love those. The terracotta like pots, those are beautiful to look at. I will say I guess it's the salt around them builds up and you get that white coating on the outside of the pot sometimes. A little bit of water and vinegar mixture will like wipe that down and that'll clean it up. You also have grow bags. I wish I had an example of that, but grow bags are almost like this cloth almost. It's great for aeration and helping the soil breathe a little bit. And those are great. And they're also flexible. You can compact them and put them away. So yeah, clay pots, I like to put herbs in because herbs like to dry out a lot between waterings. At least some of them do. Anything you want to dry out quickly and release that moisture, that clay is going to absorb that moisture. So that's what you would put in the clay pot. If you want to hold that moisture a little bit longer, I suggest going in plastic pot. Most of the things, even though plastic isn't always the best, I'll put in there. I use also wood as well. I have a whole wooden garden container in my window, and that works great too. That's a great alternative if you don't want to use as much plastic, which is also important. Once you find out your container, you need to figure out if you want a traditional container or a self-watering container. I showed you a self-watering container earlier, right? So self-watering containers are great if you want to just hit it once a week. You still have to watch the maintenance and the growth of the plant, but for the most part, you don't have to worry about watering because the plant will absorb the water itself. Traditional containers, you might have to water every day or every other day, and that's fine too. Sometimes it's not worth going through the trouble of making this big container if you're just doing something like herbs and you have a watering day anyway. So yeah, definitely make sure you have a watering day. If your days to relax and to meditate is Sundays, you can pray and then make sure you water your plants. Just like you set up your time to pray and to meditate and spend some time to like de-stress, make sure you put your plants into that schedule as well. Every Monday is my watering day. So I'll put on some nice music. You know, the plants actually, I hear the plants like the music. I don't know the science behind it. You know, my plants like 90s R&B. It is what it is. But, you know, make sure you kind of talk to your plants a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
you kind of, you flow with them and just be in good spirits there. So, yeah, that's definitely important. Definitely have a watering day. That is important. All right. Building the right soil. So, yes, making sure you have the right soil is important. Like I said, equal parts coconut coir, rice husk, and compost. And then in that, there are other nutrients and fertilizers that you can use. And those are a great way to start. If you want to start off your soil, right, make sure it has a naturally built-in fertilizer. There's two types of fertilizers for the most part. There's like the grainy type of fertilizer that are actually components, little pieces that you kind of spread into your soil and mix in. It's a slow releasing fertilizer. And then you have your liquid fertilizers. And be careful with the fertilizers, especially the ones that are synthetic. If you can go organic with the fertilizer, that is the best because sometimes the synthetic ones, they're quick release. And so sometimes your plants aren't ready for all those nutrients and things and that come with the fertilizer. So you want to be very careful not to burn your plants from not using the right fertilizer. If you do use synthetic fertilizers, because sometimes it is easier, make sure you read the instructions on the back of whatever you get. They will tell you the exact amount you need to put with your plants. And so just be careful with that. All right. And then lastly, like someone was asking before, positioning your container for optimum growth. That's the best thing about growing containers. Containers are sometimes easier to move than if you are doing a garden bed. So I'm a big fan of starting containers. If you're the first time gardening, you can move those around a little bit easier than something that is in the ground.